Hello, everyone. We'll begin our webinar shortly. This is Scalable Storage On-Prem for AWS Outposts. Uh, we'll begin in just a moment. I want to give everyone a chance to get logged in and settled. In the meantime, just a few housekeeping items. I want to remind everyone that although we will be muted for the duration of the webinar, we will be taking questions. There's a chat box on your screen there, so please go ahead and enter those in the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the screen. You'll also find down there more information in attachments. So we encourage you to please take a moment now. We got a second and download some of those because I think you'll find some interesting information down there. Also, after the webinar is over, you will be sent a copy of the presentation. So no need to take copious notes as we're going along. I think this is going to be really exciting. Looking forward to getting this started. So just give us 30 seconds here for other folks to get logged in, and we will get going. All right, let's go ahead and get this started. So welcome to our viewers, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar today titled Scalable Storage On-Prem for AWS Outposts. My name is John Toor, and I am the CMO at Cloudian. I will be your host and co-presenting, and joining us today is Joshua Burgin, who is the General Manager for AWS Outposts. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
And before we begin, I wanted to point out to those who just joined, we'll be taking questions. So please go ahead and enter those at the bottom of the screen in the question tab. And so with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. So the real topic here is, we're going to talk about what AWS Outpost is and what it does, first of all, and then how it can do even more when you have access to scalable storage in your data center. So that's really what this is all about, is what Outpost does, how you can do more with it with scalable storage. So we'll do a little intro to Outpost and its use cases, some of the drivers for S3 compatible storage on-prem, and then a little snapshot of Cloudian. And finally, at the end, I think this will be really interesting. Looking forward to hearing this. We'll get a little snapshot from Joshua on what's next for AWS Outpost. So we'll get some kind of inside looks at what's coming down the pike here. So with that, let me just start off with the the high level question, Joshua. Tell us a little bit about what is AWS Outpost and what does it do?
Yeah, sure. That's great. Luckily, I'm familiar with that topic, so appreciate you starting easy here on me. So Outpost is, we call it a fully managed service, but fundamentally it is a AWS hardware and services that you can use to run the cloud on your premises or in a co-location facility by installing your applications on top of the Outposts. The model that we have now starts at a 42U rack, and 42Us, it's a industry standard way of describing like how large something is, how much does it take up in your data center. So 42Us is one full rack position. But it actually doesn't stop there. You can actually combine outpost racks together and form a larger logical outpost, up to 96 racks, which is like 70,000 virtual machines or instances, as we call them. And so it's the same hardware that we run in our regions, right? The same Nitro system, which is our custom offload card with silicon that we manufacture ourselves. It's got a security chip on it, and it offloads all the virtualization overhead onto this Nitro card. So you're getting 99% of the CPU and RAM for your VMs, your instances, and getting bare metal like performance. So that's true in the region. We have these 25 regions around the world, and now it's true anywhere in the world, right? Your co-location facility, your factory, your office building, your data center, whatever it is, you can run a subset of the AWS services on the Outpost. And when we say fully managed, what we mean is we handle the patching, the firmware upgrades, all the services that run on top of it, EC2, EBS, S3, which obviously we're here to talk about a little bit more about how Cloudian fits into that. And also ALB, RDS, all of those things are patched and managed for you. Like, we're not shipping you DVDs that you kind of load in. So it takes away all the pain of managing your own infrastructure but it's still really useful for all those situations where you can't just move everything to the region. And maybe I'll go back to the slides. I can kind of get into why that is.
Well, yeah. So if I'm an AWS user in the cloud right now, it sounds like I'm getting a very cloud-like experience on-prem. How do those? You said it's a subset of services. How broad a subset of services is it? Am I getting pretty much the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to answer that question, so I'll give you both answers. One is that there's a set of services that run locally on the outpost, and so that would be EC2, EBS. They have RDS. ALB, which is our application load balancer, Elasticache, EMR, Elastic MapReduce, right, for Spark and Hadoop and Hive and those sort of workloads. And then there's also these third-party services through our Outpost Service Ready program. So those are things available through our marketplace from ISVs. And we have, I think, 60 or 70 of those that are available across security and storage and network monitoring and databases and all sorts of things like that. So those are the things that run locally. Then there's 185, 190 AWS services, and a lot of those you can actually use. They're running in the region, but you can use them on the outpost because it's connected to our AWS regions. So that would be things like you can put your instances in an auto-scaling group. You can use CloudWatch and CloudTrail for monitoring and auditing, GuardDuty, you can use Cloud Indoor services to kind of move data back and forth between your on-prem equipment and the outpost or the outpost in the region, things like that. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And, for most customers, what we hear is that's what they want, right? You can use auto-scaling right now and put your instances running on an outpost in an auto-scaling group where the auto-scaling group is managed in the region. But if your instance has a health degrade notification, it can get replaced automatically on the outpost. So it's different than the Snowball. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but our Snowball edge devices and Snowcone, those are designed to run totally autonomously, and they have a very small subset of functionality. But if you're at the rugged edge or you're moving around, you're going to use a Snow device. If you're in a data center, you don't move your data center,
right,
at least very often, right? And so being connected, and if you're running an application that's connected to the internet, you're already connected anyway.
Right, exactly. So you get a pretty broad set of services, and I guess what you can't get locally, you can get in the cloud. So really, you have access to everything. So what is motivating people to do Outposts? I mean, what are some of the use cases, and why would I want Outposts in my data center?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's been really broad, right? There's every vertical or industry or market segment that you could imagine, from governments to other companies to healthcare, financial services. I'll get into that a little bit more. But at a broad level, we're hearing three things from people. One is they have workloads that are latency sensitive. So this means if we had a cloud region literally everywhere, and in some cases even in not just major cities, but inside of inside your facility, if AWS could do that, we could achieve the latency people wanted, and you wouldn't need an outpost. But in a lot of other circumstances, you need single-digit millisecond latency, and we don't have a region or a local zone, and local zones are built on Outpost. We don't have it near you, right? We don't have one in your house, my house, in your hospital, in your factory, and so forth. And so if you need that single-digit millisecond latency, you're stuck on-prem, right? It's just, until we solve the speed of light problem, which we're not working on apparently. Yeah. And it turns out it's like the weather, right? Everybody talks about it, but nobody's doing anything. So, yeah. So those things we hear a lot, right? If you have a factory or a hospital, or you're doing, you're using a Wacom tablet to draw, the milliseconds matter. So you need something on-prem because it's just the speed of light. The second thing was this local data processing. So here you're getting huge amounts of data being generated, and you want to process it before moving to the cloud. You don't need all that data in the cloud. You need the output of it, or the tokenized data, right? In the case of maybe PII or other things that you don't want to push to the cloud. So there's another example where, I mean, if you could wave a magic wand and have everything be free as you transfer data around and instantaneous, you wouldn't need on-premises. You wouldn't need a data center or a colo, but you do. So a lot of local data processing, right? Autonomous vehicle use cases, medical imaging, that sort of thing. And then going back to the slides here, the third one is a broad category called data residency. And this is either because there's a government regulation or a contract, or it's just your business requirements that dictate data and infrastructure, so compute and storage, they reside in a specific country or municipality or city or facility. Those are the three like general use cases that are guiding us. There's another one that I didn't mention, which is just some people just prefer it. And one of the hallmarks of AWS is we give people choice, right? We try not to be paternalistic about how you have to do something. You can do things using our infrastructure, our managed services, third-party managed services. You can build everything yourself. You can use bare metal instances, all the different kinds of instances, different kinds of storage, object, block, file. And so Outposts for some customers is really just, hey, we plan maybe in the fullness of time that everything will go to the cloud, but that's 20 years from now, right? We have a mainframe or we have some other corporate reason to be in a bunch of data centers. And so Outpost fits into that world.
Exactly. And those use cases really tie into the storage story. So let's talk about that for a second. So, when you're talking about on-prem storage, what we're talking about is scalable storage. You've got a certain amount of S3 unstructured data storage within your Outpost rack. I think the limit is something just short of 100 terabytes. What we're in the business of is allowing you to scale beyond that up to multiple petabytes if you wish. What are some of the use cases you see that drive the need for additional on-prem storage?
No, that's it. Let's keep this slide up here because I think there's a lot going on here. So as you mentioned, right now on Outpost you can order both your EBS, your block storage, and S3, which is object storage, in chunks up to about 100 terabytes, which is a lot for some people if they don't have, but is not a lot for people who need petabytes or exabytes. So where we start hearing that is, again, it's kind of all over the map. So you have telcos running their virtual network functions, like generating at what they call the CU or the central unit, as opposed to all the way at the far edge. Or you have content production. I mentioned this media and entertainment, right? Doing visual effects. You watch movies. I remember back when we could go to the movie theaters. I hear that starting up again. So all of those things generate just exabytes, and you don't want to transfer that back and forth to the cloud, right? You need on-prem storage, and you need somebody like a Cloudian, right? Who right now what we've decided to focus on with Outposts, right, is this smaller set of things that we do. And Cloudian has the perfect solution here for when you need petabytes or exabytes of high performance storage. Same thing is true in financial services, right? Where you have these huge, risk analysis grids, or there's this new regulation called, if I remember correctly, FRTB, Fundamental Review of Trading Books, which is another form of risk analysis that evolved after the 2008-2009 financial crisis. People are looking for how they can do this highly scalable analysis with 50,000, 100,000 cores and spin it up and down. And they're doing some of it in the cloud, right, in our regions, but some of it on-prem for a bunch of different reasons, right? These huge conglomerates. You got healthcare and life sciences. I think this is a huge emerging area where people are looking to modernize what they do and bring all of that cloud goodness to the locations around the world in some cases. And again, that requires, if you're doing medical images and you're looking at it, you're trying to generate these super high resolution images for radiology and MRIs, which is enabling new kinds of patient care. That requires just a massive amount of unstructured data. Transportation is a big area that, again, is evolving. You think of autonomous vehicles, fleet management, doing recommendations. A lot of that is you want to do it in real time at the 5G edge, or in these things that they call garages, which sounds kind of low end. I have a garage, but these are really essentially data centers where the vehicles come back every night and get new algorithms kind of pushed to them. And the last, and obviously Amazon's in this business too, industrial automation, right? Where the robots in the warehouse are doing things and collecting enormous amounts of data from IoT sensors. So, it's probably not limited to all these things, but in the last year, I've been very excited or overwhelmed. I don't know what their case is, but kind of amazed maybe by how much data people say they're generating, either on-prem or in cities or at the 5G edge, and how many of them are thinking about moving to object stores, right? Which is pretty common in the cloud, right? S3 has been around 15 years. Lots of people use it. It's a little bit less common on-prem historically, right? People use block and file storage, or they're a little more familiar with it. But again, with Outposts and Cloudian, what we hear a lot of is people saying, hey, how do I bring that unstructured exabyte scale storage into these kind of use cases? And so, now we can solve that problem.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that there's so many different use cases opening up that are collecting data in remote locations, and often that data is best stored and handled where it resides. We call it data gravity, right? Data just naturally tends to reside where it's created, and we're finding so many new ways of creating it. Tesla just launched their new self-driving functionality, which interestingly takes a 30-second video snippet of all its cameras every time you have to touch the wheel and take control. So it's learning from every time you have to interact with the car. So boom, you've got 30 seconds of data collected every time someone touches the wheel and makes a correction for all the cars that Tesla is selling that are being driven around. So just think about what that is doing in terms of data collection remotely, and how that's going to be generating new information in the field that we want to process and analyze.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the data gravity concept you mentioned, we hear that a lot. Some of it is also driven by, I mentioned this earlier, this residency requirements, right? For better or worse, I'm not really here to comment on why, but increasingly around the world, governments and industries are choosing to pass, laws and regulations that require the data stay local. And I put it in quotes because local is defined, it could be inside the EU, it could be mobile betting, right? For all these, it's being legalized right around the world. This kind of iGaming is the industry, except that all the places are saying, your compute and storage have to be in my city, or sometimes even in a specific data center. And so the good news is now you don't have to choose between cloud goodness and staying on-prem and meeting all these regulations, right? And imagine this, right? If you have a mobile betting application that you want to roll out in the UK and the EU and Minnesota and Macau, previously you're like, great, now I got to spin up a procurement function and figure out import, export, and sign all these data center contracts. And now you're like, okay, work with AWS and work with somebody like Cloudian, and I can deploy the same thing everywhere. I can deploy it in the regions where it makes sense, and I can deploy it on a small outpost where it makes sense.
Right, which exactly. I think that's the next question I wanted to explore just for a second is when I'm going on-prem, as you already said, I mean, people are very familiar with S3 in the cloud. They've been using it for years, but as you already mentioned, S3 on-prem is less familiar to a lot of folks. And frankly, the knee-jerk reaction maybe just go with something I already know, like using traditional file storage when I'm going on-prem. So when you talk to customers around their data storage and expanding with Outposts, what are the reasons that people want to use an S3 compatible storage as opposed to some other storage type?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 4 or 5 reasons. Like first, again, there's not one kind of storage for everything, right? There's block, file, and object. We have block and object right now. We've said this before that. Our file storage offering, which is what we call FSX, will be coming for Outposts, in the relevant future. But what we hear most is cloud native applications work best with object storage. And the reason is that object storage is great for handling enormous volumes of unstructured data. It doesn't have the overhead of block and file. Not sure where my camera went here. And and so when you think about that, if you have like a relational database, it tends to actually need the overhead of block storage. And so if you have a traditional enterprise application, it tends to run expecting file storage hierarchy, right? It might even use the file storage hierarchy as part of how it manages access. But cloud native applications use the metadata associated with object storage to manage access and have really tight, finely grained access control. And so it's just natively built into object storage. It's super flexible. And with that, you get scalability, right? If you're going to go into exabytes of storage, people have had to work around the limitations of file storage for years trying to get to that. And there's no limitation in that case with object storage. And I mentioned security as well. And you mentioned S3, and I don't want to make this all about AWS here, but people who are building cloud native applications on our regions are already using S3 for this. And so if we're doing it on an outpost, right, for those same applications or the piece of application that has to remain on-prem, they want it to be compatible with the S3 API. And so that has, you can run that same application you're running in the region or that you anticipate running in the region on the outpost. So that S3 compatibility in terms of buckets and access points and how you do access control and logging, all of that compatibility comes with the fact that you're using not just object storage, but specifically S3 compatible object storage on your outpost.
Right. That's a super lead in to a quick snapshot. Let me just do a quick snapshot on Cloudian, and after that, let's get on with what's next for Outpost. But what you just said is a perfect lead in to what we've been up to since 2012. Cloudian is specifically S3 compatible storage. That's all we do is S3 compatible storage. And the whole point of it is to create something that meets the needs that you exactly just described. So, a cost-effective, scalable system that is S3 compatible in your data center. So, it operates exactly like S3 in the cloud. The same APIs, the same kind of management infrastructure, the same lights out scalability, seamless scalability. But it all resides in your data center. And what's exciting about that is it provides you the opportunity to scale your outpost storage just like you would scale in the cloud. So we offer now Cloudian for AWS Outposts, which is exabyte scalable S3 compatible storage that resides right alongside the outposts in your data center. And this can be either on appliances or software-defined storage on the servers of your choice. So you don't need to use our specific hardware. You can use the hardware that you choose. But the point is, either way, it's in your data center, co-located with the outpost, so you get that low latency access. And really, the drivers for this are exactly the things that you just said. So, data residency. The data stays in your data center. When it goes from the outpost to the Cloudian device, that's where it goes. It's not getting replicated elsewhere unless you want it to. You have the ability to replicate it elsewhere. You can use tiering to tier it off to the cloud or to Cloudian at a remote location, but that's configurable. If you want it to just stay in that one place, that's where it is. And then the other piece of this is it works with all of your S3 compatible applications. So exactly what you were just talking about, Joshua, the portability between on-prem and cloud is key, right? The ability to do the same thing in either place. That's what we enable because the S3 compatibility is built in. So some of the use cases for this are exactly the same use cases that you just described. So healthcare and life sciences, up to an exabyte of storage available in your data center means you've got all the room you need either for health records or for imaging or for genomic research. Those are some of the big drivers of capacity. Big data and analytics. People are collecting massive amounts of information with Amazon EMR, Splunk, Elasticsearch. All of that needs a place to go. And if you need it on-prem, you've got a scalable environment. M&E environments, same thing. Huge collections of media files. Often people want to keep those media files in a very controlled environment because that is their lifeblood. They want the security is paramount on those, and also fast access is paramount. So having those on-prem for an M&E workload is key. And then you mentioned earlier public sector. Cloudian has the broadest array of security certifications of any storage supplier in object storage. And we offer a feature called Object Lock, which is also available on S3, but that gives you immutable storage in your data center. So your data is protected from encryption by ransomware. Ransomware has been a huge issue for the past year and a half, as we all know. And I think the ability to protect that data in your own data center using object lock functionality is very attractive to a lot of folks, both in the public sector and in private as well. So I think the use cases really mirror what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think the public sector use case in particular, I'm just very excited about, right? Whether it's governments or educational institutions or academic medical research centers, you really hear this around the world, right? These are people who want to transform, but haven't been able to, right? Because of regulations that require they stay on-prem and the lack of availability of cloud-like services.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a huge driver of our business is as different governments are becoming almost, cloud operated themselves. I mean, they're not necessarily cloud suppliers, but they're dependent upon the cloud. We become a supplier of that infrastructure. And the fact that we can offer security and we can offer immutable storage and we can do it all within their domain is a huge driver of our business right now. So I think this idea of cloud and on-prem being collaborative and going back and forth in a way that we can provide the same services in both places is a huge driver. So just a little bit about who we are. We're, as I said, an enterprise storage supplier. We're about 700 customers. The native S3 API is really what we do. So that's a very key part of our overall business because it was the founding principle of the company back in 2012. Two-time recipient of Gartner Customer Choice, Outpost Service Ready certified, #1 in Gartner Critical Capabilities for all 5 use cases for object storage, and of course, ransomware protection with the S3 API. So let me just ask you a question before we get into that next topic, which is what's next for Outpost. We've been kind of talking a lot around the topic of hybrid cloud and what people are doing to enable portability between on-prem and cloud environments. Can you talk a little bit about how AWS views the subject of hybrid cloud and what's driving that interest?
Yeah, it's an interesting question about what's driving the interest, right? I think to be completely honest, right, if you looked back at what we used to say, right, is that we were very focused on expanding our regions, right? We started out with one region and one instance type, and now we have 400 instance types and 25 regions and 80 availability zones around the world. And I think it was really important that we kind of stay focused on that and offered something that was what we would consider differentiated compared to what you could get before, right? You took things that used to take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you brought them down to minutes. People could provision things on demand. We had fully managed services. So in that world, it obviously took us a while to get to the place where it made sense to say, well, what could we do on-prem that would be differentiated over what people have? You don't want to give people something that's the same as what they can get from anybody else. So what it comes down to is we wanted to have something differentiated we could do on-prem, because that's what people asked us for. They said, can you give me the AWS experience but on-prem? And I think in the beginning, the answer was no, right? We couldn't do that. But when we invented the Nitro system, when we innovated on the kind of the hardware and the hypervisor side, we had the ability to take the AWS hardware, like, with this kind of custom hypervisor and lightweight hypervisor, security chip, all of the instances we have in the region, and bring them on-prem, right? Same security, same performance, subset of the services, right? But connected to everything else. And in that world, when people started coming to us, it finally made sense to say, hey, let's do something on-prem. And so what we did was we solved it the way we always do with AWS, which is at the most primitive level, right? We always start kind of from like the bottom up. We don't just be like, okay, someone said hybrid, let's like take the AWS name and slap it on some third-party hardware, thumbs up, right? Like that, nobody asked us to do that, and so we didn't do it. What we did was, how do we take the hardware we run in the region, 15 years of hardware engineering expertise, all the way down. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but down to like the electrical and mechanical engineering level. We monitor and build in some cases our own components, or when we get them from suppliers, we burn them in to determine if there's going to be, excessive wear on the hard drives. And these are the kind of things where if you're operating hardware on people's behalf, they can do it on their own, but they can't do it at the scale that we're at. And so we bring all that goodness down to on-prem. So what we think of as hybrid is it's more of like the distributed cloud is the way I would think of it, or a cloud continuum. One end, you have the regions, super scalable, elastic. They are in places that we want them to be in AWS, that we judge there to be enough demand. Then at the far, far edge, you have like, Snowball and Snowcone and mobile and rugged data transfer and small amounts of compute. Then we built Outposts, which are this building block on top of which we built local zones and wavelength zones, which are, again, like small, zonal deployments that we can put. We're going to put, I think, 16 or so of those around the United States. For local zones, we've already got 10 wavelength zones. I think we're going to double that number with our telco partners. And then you have, of course, people can install the Outposts themselves. And I mentioned the full rack unit there, John. We're also going to be delivering these 1U and 2U single Outpost servers, which are really good for those use cases like at the far edge at the telco or in a retail store or a restaurant, where you don't need that much compute and storage, but you're also not like a Snowball device moving it around all the time. It's a fixed install. And so with that, you kind of have that same AWS experience from like a single server up to 96 racks, up to a local zone, or all the way up to a region. We kind of think of it less as when people say hybrid cloud, the way we think of it is it's all the cloud. It's just distributed. Some of it's running in a cell site, some of it's running in your restaurant, some of it's running in a city, some of it's running in giant data center that you run, and then some of it's running in what people traditionally refer to as the public cloud. But we kind of don't think about that as a decision that people want to have to make. So that, I'm not saying we've got it all right yet. It's still very early days for the Outpost business. We've only been generally available for 13, 15 months right now, which is, if you compare that to, it's the 15th anniversary of EC2 this summer, and recently it was the 15th anniversary of S3. Those are obviously, they've been around a little bit longer and at scale. The good news is we took all of that and we're kind of doing the same thing on Outposts. So we're not relearning the same lessons. We're fond of saying there's no compression algorithm for experience. And I think that's definitely true, and it's why Outposts has resonated with people, where previous attempts at hybrid cloud, it's definitely something people want, but the previous attempts, we hear this from customers, is they couldn't make it work, right? They couldn't piece together hardware and software and a hypervisor and all this kind of things. They wanted it to work seamlessly together no matter where they deployed it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the key, is making it seamless and easy to use. I mean, the biggest issue for an IT manager is skills, right? If I have to train my people on doing something entirely new, that is a very different thing than if I can take what I'm doing in the cloud and move it on-prem using the same skills, the same tools, the same management capabilities.
We had a customer who did that I thought was really great, which was Typico, which is in that iGaming space, and they talked about how they can train their developers in days instead of weeks. And they're deploying their regional software with very minor changes on-prem. And so the fact that we have this hybrid offering that's very similar is exactly what you talked about. Developer productivity. It's not just regulations, right? It's people don't want to go figure out different things depending on where they're operating. And there've been a bunch of other attempts at this from different vendors. And I feel like we're at least on the right track. We're kind of at least getting in the vicinity of what people want.
Yeah, no, it feels leaps and bounds. I mean, I've been doing this for 6 years now. It feels leaps and bounds more advanced, more enterprise ready than anything we've seen in hybrid previously. So it's really, really exciting. What is next for AWS? You already mentioned the smaller version of Outposts. Any other tidbits you can share on what's coming?
Yeah, what's next? This is one of the things we're very fond of saying, and it's very true for me. that 90% of our roadmap is driven by what customers ask us to do. We're delivering what customers are telling us they want. The other 10%, we kind of reach around the corner and deliver something and delight people with something they didn't even know they needed. So that's been the hallmark of AWS, been the hallmark of Amazon. It's going to continue to be the hallmark of Outposts as well. We're going to keep delivering what people want. I mentioned this earlier, the 1U and 2U servers, are very excited about these. Telco, restaurants, retail, people are going to transform themselves and get out of the business of managing hardware and IT and get back to the business of customer experience, which is what they're really good at. So those are coming later this year. I know we're sort of halfway through the year, but we're working feverishly to deliver those. The other thing I mentioned is we actually have some larger storage tiers for S3. Not anything approaching what Cloudian can do, but people have said, like, can you just bump it up a little bit? And so we're going to be delivering a slightly larger S3 storage tier in, looking at my watch, like a week or so. There's some additional countries that are coming soon for Outposts. Obviously, Outpost does you no good unless you can install it in the place where you need it. So we have like 50 some countries right now and territories, and we're adding 6 more in the next 6 months or so. And then we're going to, just based on where people tell us to do it. By the way, it turns out in the real world, there are some constraints on where you can actually export and import hardware and install them. So we, of course, on the customer's behalf, work with the appropriate regulatory and tax authorities to make sure that you are compliant. You mentioned all those compliance certifications. They apply doubly so to hardware that you're operating. And you have customers who have like 38 factories around the world. That's a lot of complexity for them, and they expect us to go solve that. So there are human beings in the background working with tax and legal and these regulatory compliance regimes, which change all the time, and they're different in every country, and that's just our job to solve that. And then the other one is we're going to continue to evolve the storage and managed services that we already have. So I can't reveal everything, but I'm very excited about RDS, right, which we have as a managed database service. We launched with for Outposts with MySQL and Postgres support. Recently, we announced SQL Server support, and there's a bunch of things coming from RDS that make it more useful in kind of high availability and durability situations. So we're just going to keep doing these things as we hear them from customers. But I'm actually more excited about what we're going to be able to do with partners like Cloudian, right? The Service Ready program, which you are a part of, thank you, has really exploded in interest. We launched it and we thought we'd have honestly, I think 15 or 20 service partners, and we launched with 40, and now we have 60 and maybe 65, 70 certified solutions. So I think that's not because I'm so persuasive. I don't believe that. I think it's because customers are saying, I'm already using things from Cloudian or from Trend Micro, or from Cisco or Veritas, right, for security and monitoring and backup and storage. I'm already using that on-prem, or I'm using that in the cloud. I want to keep using that here. And so we make it pretty easy for a vendor to get certified using our Outpost test lab. So I'm hoping in the next year or so we double that number. So it's all going to be based on what customers tell the vendors they want.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I found the AWS team to be very customer responsive. Hey, they'd take away my marketing license if I didn't ask the commercial question. But how do you buy it? How do you buy Outposts?
How do you buy an Outpost? You can, people can put their credit card number right into the chat. No, kidding. Don't do that. Don't put your credit card number. Now I'm going to get in trouble. Don't put. It is actually that simple. You can order them from the console on AWS. If you work with a solutions integrator, and we have a number of them that are Outpost certified, you can, if that's who manages your AWS estate, you can order them through them. So you can order it directly. Most people, since this is a large enough capital purchase, I'll be frank that most people are not typing their credit card number, into the AWS portal to buy them. They're using their account team or the solutions integrator who functions as their AWS management team to do that. So, certainly if you're spending millions or tens of millions of dollars on a very large Outpost install, you're going to have a conversation with somebody before you do that.
Right.
Every now and then, though, we do get an order directly through the console. So, you can go to AWS to the Outpost webpage and then log in and play around with the configuration. You can talk to your account team, your account reps if you have them, and then you can talk to your solutions integrator as well, right? People like Accenture and Tata and Nosh in Portugal, those sort of people.
Yeah, and from our perspective, I mean, we work with many of those same solution integrators. You can obtain Cloudian through them. If you need a steer on where to go, just go to our website. We have a live chat that you can pull up instantaneously and get an answer right on the spot. So just go to cloudian.com, pull up the live chat, ask a question, or there's a contact us box on there. We can help direct you. Or as I said, we've got multiple integrators such as E+, WWT, and a host of others who would be happy to help out.
WWT is a great one. I'm glad you mentioned that. A lot of people, those who are familiar, understand how big they are, but they're one of the largest African-American owned businesses in the world, one of the largest private companies in the world. They have like 6,000 employees around the world, and they serve, you mentioned public sector. There's so many customers that I run into that are looking to WWT to kind of transform how they do business. They have an Outpost like test lab and proof of concept lab that they're using with customers to kind of show them repeatedly, here's how we can transform aspects of your business. And I know they actually have an Outpost with Cloudian storage there as well. So I think that's, that's probably not because you and I called WWT on the phone and told them they had to get on the Outpost and Cloudian train. It's because their customers are saying, like, hey, how do I do this?
Yeah, no, if you want to see these two things working together, see the actual configuration, see the actual test results,
right.
as you said, WWT already has it in hand. It's proven, it's in there, it's in St. Louis, humming away. So,
and they give us really good feedback too, which is what I like.
They do. They have an awesome team and a great facility there. So we're thrilled to be working with them. Hey, I think we got a couple of questions that have come in
the chat box.
Let me see if I can pull up something here. So, question about Cloudian is, can Cloudian storage be shared with other use cases that are external to Outpost? So the question is, you put a Cloudian system in your lab co-located with your Outpost system. Is that system dedicated to Outpost? And the answer is no. It's a multi-tenant environment. So if you think about the cloud and cloud storage, that is obviously multi-tenant, right? You got hundreds of thousands of users using the same storage system, and they all operate independently. It's like you have your own storage system when you're using S3 in the cloud. It's the same thing with S3 in your data center. So when you put a Cloudian in your data center, that can be used by many users, all of whom appear to have their individual namespace, all have the same security as any other user. And Outpost is one of them. So Outpost can be one of the users of that Cloudian system. But yes, our common use case for us is being used as a backup and archive target with people like Veeam or Commvault or Veritas or Rubrik. That is a very common use case for us. So in one deployment we're expecting to see is people use Cloudian for Outpost storage in one use case, and then they have a second use case where they're using it as a backup target. Because again, we scale to petabytes or even to an exabyte if you desire. So yes, multiple users are great. We encourage it.
Yeah, I mean, we designed Outpost to sit alongside your other on-prem infrastructure, and in some cases, people are replacing their whole data center or installing Outpost in new locations. But we come across that use case that I assume this question came from a lot, right? Which is, I have other applications running not on the Outpost, and I have to have shared storage.
Exactly. Shared storage is the key because it's all about efficiency. Everyone is interested in how I can do more for less, and the efficiency of managing one large storage infrastructure on-prem. One provider in the cloud. I mean, that's your simplest possible world, and that's exactly what we enable with scalable storage. One question is data stored in Cloudian also stored in the cloud, and that gets back to the data residency question. The answer is it's configurable. If you
Right.
want to replicate it to AWS S3, absolutely. If you want to just stay in your data center, you can do that too. It's really up to you. And that's the point, is you know exactly where your data is, you know exactly where it isn't. And by the way, it's all viewable on a utility we have called HyperIQ, which is a way of viewing all of your information and also viewing who's accessing it. So how that data, where that data physically sits, and who's using it. So if you're concerned about data residency and data security, data sovereignty, we can both assure where your data resides, and we can give you a view, real-time visibility on where that data is and how it's being used.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the same thing with all the outpost storage. It's configurable, right? There's ways you could replicate between outposts in the region, all of this. It depends on the application, right? I mean, some of it is data can never leave the data center, right? And you can lock it down in that regard, and you can actually take away the permissions in some cases from the certain user roles to move data out. In other cases, that makes no sense, right? People want to back up to the cloud. They're not subject to a regulation that would prevent that. And so, the good news is Cloudian supports that as well. And the S3 compatibility means that you can kind of move, if it makes sense, you can move it seamlessly back and forth.
Yeah, it's all comes back to exactly what you said earlier. It's the customer's choice. Everyone's got different parameters on what they need for different operational requirements, and we have to be able to give them the ability to do that and do it easily and do it with a standardized set of commands. It really comes down to maintaining that standardization on the S3 API that allows you to manage your cloud and on-prem environments the same way.
I see some more questions popping up, which is good. It says, can you get started with Cloudian if you don't have organized on-prem storage?
Absolutely. I mean, that's yes. We're expecting to see more of that. Typically, our customer today is operating on-prem storage already, but we are definitely expecting to see more instances where customers are in the cloud and they're moving some stuff on-prem with an Outpost, and they need scalable storage to go along with that. We sit in a conventional rack, the same as Outposts. It can be managed with same personnel. It's very easy to use. We've got extensive training and support offered to basically handhold you through the whole process. So the answer is absolutely.
Yeah, let me see. We talked about this one. I'll make it. So how much S3 object storage is it possible to add? So petabytes to an exabyte, depending on how much physical space you have. There's obviously, a little more than a petabyte in a rack. And, if you only have one rack position, there's only so much you can do. If you have many rack positions, you can add much more storage. You can also, of course, the way to think about it is at a certain point, you're going to have multiple logical outposts and multiple, Cloudian installations as well, right? So it's effectively limitless, but you're probably not going to have multiple exabytes on a single outpost. You're also not going to have a multi-hundred rack single logical outpost. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Right. But you mentioned Outpost is scalable. You can go up to multiple racks. And I assume when you go to the 1U, 2Us, you can probably do multiple of those as well. We're the same way. It's a clustered storage environment. Whether you have 3 nodes or 300 nodes, they're all configured in the same namespace, if you like. They are certainly in one cluster. You can divide that one cluster up into as many namespaces as you want, but they can all be one if that's what you need. So scalability is easy.
You can do up to when the 1U and 2Us are out, we can only put up to about 6 together. And it's just sort of, but the good news is the next question, perfect timing, is will Cloudian support 1U and 2U outposts? So the answer is we're working together on enabling that. So we're looking forward to that as we release. There will definitely be use cases where you're going to want external storage and durable storage. And Cloudian alongside some number of kind of 1U and 2U outposts. I don't know what to call them, a bundle, a gang. We don't have a name for a gaggle of a gaggle. We probably need a name for that. So the answer is we definitely see a world for storage partners like Cloudian to play a big part in the 1U and 2U success. Obviously, if you only have a single 1U server, and it's ephemeral and you're not storing anything other than just on the kind of instant storage, then you don't need external storage, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. One question about can Cloudian store files? The answer is absolutely. We have a file connector called Hyperfile, which does exactly that, SMB and NFS files. And of course, the backend storage is Cloudian as well. So everything is stored on that same object storage pool.
Yeah.
And then question on the Outpost security.
Yeah. Who takes care of the physical security? There is a virtual avatar that's sent with every outpost that stands in front of it. It's like a hologram. No, I'm just making that up. That's not true. That would be really cool. We should do that. That's not what happened. We use what we call the shared responsibility model. So I'll go into depth in this. One is the physical security of your data center or your colo is your responsibility, or the colo providers. Like, we don't send security guards or holograms or cameras to determine if somebody's accessing your data center, right? So it's up to you to have badge readers and cameras and auditing of like who comes in and out of your data center. However, we knew this when we were building Outposts, so we built them with really robust physical security. So that means the rack has like locking front and back. It has sides on the rack, right? You can't just kind of like reach in and grab stuff. It has tamper detection on, if people have opened the rack without your kind of authority, right? Kind of jimmied it loose. And then it has tamper detection and physical security on every single server as well. So we have this thing we call the NSK, the Nitro security key, which basically you can use to cryptographically shred all of the contents, like the memory and the contents of what's on the disk. It meets a bunch of government standards. So that's different than like hitting it with a hammer, which is the old way of, which by the way doesn't actually necessarily get rid of everything. This is a more thorough method of having encryption all the way down to the DRAM, but then this concept where you kind of twist this screw and all of the contents of your hard drives and the memory are cryptographically wiped. So, and there's also tamper detection on the servers themselves. So that's what I mean when I say shared responsibility. We take care of the fact that it's like encrypted all the way down to the hypervisor, and we give you these tools to say, hey, if you're gonna, I don't know, if we have a hardware failure and we need to take away the server. By the way, I know the dirty secret of the cloud is that there are servers. Probably pretty obvious to people on Outposts that they're made up of servers. But people want to know, like, what if you have to take that back from me, right? And you're gonna, wipe everything. Are you going to destroy it on site? And the answer is we have these tools that keep you safe. But it's all about defense in depth. There's no sort of the old style of security with data centers, what we call igloo security. It's just like hard on the outside and then nothing on the inside. So that would be us relying on you to secure the physical access to the data center. But of course, you can have somebody who shouldn't, or somebody who should but has malicious intent, get inside of your data center or your colo. But once they're in, now there's physical security of the outpost. But what if they breach that? What if they take the server away, right? We have all of these things. It's encrypted all the way down to the DRAM, and you can have tamper detection. And if it gets removed, everything gets wiped. And you can set alarms on if something is tampered with. And of course, we hope that you have alarming on unauthorized access to your data center itself. So that is substantially more, is what we hear, substantially more security than what most people have themselves. Not everybody. There's obviously some people who have the same kind of defense in depth. But this is, of course, all the things that we've learned from operating in the cloud, only meant to be deployed in what we would consider not a trusted environment, right? Like, not that we don't love our customers and trust them, but like, we don't control the physical access to the data center, right? We don't have badge readers and cameras and all of those kind of things. So I think this is a really important topic, right? People are trusting the Outpost, and we need to make sure that we have all the ways to audit what's been going on, who's had access, what's happened during the replacement process, which is driven by us for components like the servers, and then driven by the customer for some kind of field replaceable parts, like the power supplies and that sort of thing. So we really did actually think through this, I think, to a pretty extensive degree.
Yeah, no, we're with you. I mean, that security element is so critical for data storage as well, because obviously that's really, where the target is for hackers. I mean, where are you going to go? You're going to go where the data is. So in addition to the security certifications that we offer, which is essentially covering all of EMEA and North America data security. In addition to that, we also, as you said, we have physical lockout in the box itself. So that even if somebody gains physical access to the unit and tries to plug into a maintenance port, for example, or tries to go in through some other back door, that's blocked off. So, we recognize that people have got to have, I love your term, igloo security. That's not enough. You have to protect what's inside as well, because, what we've learned from ransomware attacks is that attacks can come right from inside your company from a variety of
It's an
sources.
unfortunate world that we live in, right? I think the fact that we wouldn't work with people like storage vendors, and with it, that's kind of the whole point of the service ready program is, we wouldn't work. I don't think you would work with someone who would expose either company or customers to reputational damage. And
Right.
at the same time, that shared model means that you get, you do physical security just like we do physical security, but you also give people tooling, right? I mean, access control is nothing without people configuring it correctly and then auditing, who's had access to it and having logging about what they've done. So the fact that we both provide this really kind of like a cross-grain mesh of access controlling and physical security and auditing and logging and tools to make it as open or as locked down as you want. That's what customers tell us is important.
Yeah, no, it's secure, scalable. I mean, those are two of our key watchwords. Hey, we're just about out of time for today, and I want to, I think we got to all the questions, which is terrific. But if you have any other questions, Cloudian.com, jtour at Cloudian.com. Be happy to answer any other questions you have. And Joshua, thank you so much for joining today. There was a contact for us as well, AWS at Cloudian.com. Happy to answer any other questions, Joshua, but thank you so much for joining. It's been a super helpful session. I learned a lot. I think our viewers, I hope, really enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is it's always happy to kind of hear from customers. These questions were great. I don't know who they were from because they don't tell us that, but thank you. It's always much better to be interactive for us and designed to get at what people are after, as opposed to just you and me talking for an hour. Although, of course, that is great. No offense to yourself.
As entertaining as that would be.
As entertaining as that would be, right? We're going to take this show on the road.
Super. Thank you very much, Joshua. Cloudian.com. Please come visit. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Take care.